Now, as far as where's the field going? Non-Christian scholars would still consider most of these Christian literary device theorists to be much more conservative than the non-Christian scholars are. So it's like Bart Ehrman, if I can organize it, in a scale, Bart Ehrman is to the left of Michael Licona, et cetera. It's to the left of Norman Geisler, so we can, lay this out. So it's not as though, Bart Ehrman is just going to say, my buddy, we agree about everything now, obviously, because they believe that Jesus, really rose from the dead, and they believe in miracles and this kind of thing. And Bart Ehrman doesn't. Obviously, he's not a Christian. But there is actually quite a lot of a surprising amount of agreement because the mainstream scholars, like Dr. Ehrman, will argue that these are irreconcilable contradictions in these cases. For example, an irreconcilable contradiction about when Jesus cleansed the temple, for example, or whether Jesus really said before Abraham was I am. Ehrman will argue against that. Dr. Craig Evans has said regarding several of Jesus I am sayings that if you followed Jesus around with a video camera, you would not find him saying that. You would not actually find him saying that. And so it was interesting. That was in 2012 in a debate. Ehrman said, so you're not going to use the Gospel of John as a source for Jesus' life because you think it's metaphorical. And Evans said, fair enough. So they were agreeing on that. Wow. That the Gospel of John is not a primary historical source. So what Evans said was that the synoptics were our primary historical sources for the life of Jesus, but not John, because it's quote unquote metaphorical was Ehrman's word. And then Evans said, fair enough. So I think what we are also finding is that in the evangelical world, more and more people are agreeing with this. That's where I see the movement taking place. Especially among apologetics, there's a whole group of YouTube apologists who are very friendly to these views. They're very, very intrigued by them. I'm not sure they even always understand what the views are, frankly, because sometimes these are not spoken of in clear terms. And that's part of what the resistance has been to my work, is that I'm almost putting things too bluntly. I'm supposed to use euphemisms and so forth. But I definitely see more and more young, especially evangelicals, young male, as it happens, evangelical apologists who are adopting these views, following Dr. Licona, Dr. Evans, and to some extent, although he doesn't say as much about it, Craig Keener as well. And actually, there are also sort of the second order group of people who have endorsed the work, though they themselves don't do a lot of it. So, for example, Dr. William Lane Craig has not done a lot of bringing up these literary devices, though he does believe John moved the temple cleansing. Since that's been a thread in this talk, I'll just say he does think that, and he's very clear that he thinks that. But they will endorse Dr. Licona's work very wholeheartedly. Like he's done us such a service by showing us that there were these compositional devices. You should listen to him. So when Marty Sampson deconverted, do you guys remember that last fall? Marty Sampson was a worship leader. If you Google it, he was a worship leader at a big mega church, and he had a kind of a high profile deconversion experience. It's kind of what you might call a Twitter deconversion, where he was out there, I've ceased, I'm not a Christian anymore, et cetera, et cetera. And a lot of people were really upset because people had admired him. So Dr. William Lane Craig did a podcast about Marty Sampson's deconversion. And Sampson talked about contradictions in the Gospels as a reason for his deconversion. He even said, nobody's talking about it, which is false. I mean, lots of people are talking about it. It's like, what? But Dr. Craig said, well, most of And that was the word he used, most. The contradictions here, the alleged contradictions in the Gospels, can be explained by the compositional devices that Michael Licona has written about.
Boy, that sure makes your apologetic job a whole lot easier if you can just, brush away all of that kind of stuff. Now you don't have to explain that stuff, right?
It's interesting, and especially because they won't call it an error either, even though the information is not true. I mean, the information that Jesus say that the disciples, here, I'll pick a different one. I won't keep using the temple cleansing so we don't get bored, but that the disciples really had a fight on the night of Jesus' betrayal, the night of the Last Supper. To say that they really had a fight is incorrect. So if Luke says they really had a fight that night, that's false information, but we're not going to label it an error. We're not going to label it a contradiction. We're going to label it a literary device. I call this word magic. This is just word magic. It doesn't explain anything. It doesn't remove anything. If you were a new deconvert, imagine being a new deconvert. You've listened to Bart Ehrman. You've, adopted the idea that these were contradictions. And then somebody says, oh, no, you need to understand. These were compositional devices. Can you really imagine someone reconverting? I mean, how probable? I'm not saying it's impossible. Anything's possible with God, but it seems to me improbable that someone would reconvert to Christianity because they've been given this new label, because essentially they still are contradictions. You're still saying they contradict one another. You're just saying, well, he did it on purpose. It's like, if I trip or something and I say, well, that was me being funny. I did it on purpose. Well, okay, but you still spilled the milk. Okay. The milk is still on the floor. You did it to be funny, but the milk is still on the floor. So similarly, if you say John did it on purpose, Matthew, Mark, Luke, they did it on purpose, the information's still inaccurate. So I really don't think this is going to address deconverts or concerns, really. I don't think this is going to cause them to come back. So to answer your question, there is a movement in this direction. That is why I felt that I needed to write The Mirror of the Mask. Originally, it was blog posts. I wrote scholarly blog posts. Those received a huge amount of negative press, just like, why are you doing this? This is terrible, etc. And besides, it's just on the internet. So that was said a lot. It's just on the internet, just on the internet. Well, a lot of things are on the internet. I mean, you can put some really good content on the internet. But I went to my publisher who had published Hidden in Plain View. And I said, look, I think it's almost unfair to you. I'm not sure if I make this a book, how well it's going to sell. It's controversial. People are angry about it. And I've already published some of it on the internet, but I'm getting all this pushback that I'm doing it on the internet. How would you feel about publishing it in a book form? And he said, yeah, we're doing a print on demand model. So that removes a certain amount of our financial risk, because you're not printing 2,000 copies and having them sit somewhere in a warehouse, and then if they don't sell, you're just out that money and you just got to rent the warehouse. We're doing more of a print on demand model, being printed in small batches and so forth. We can have Amazon process them for us and so forth. He said, yes, let's do it. And it's because he encouraged me that I actually put it in a book form. And it's not just what was already on the internet, but I was like, yeah, let's put it in a book form because this is important, because people are coming to believe this.